Alright, let's talk a little bit about fantasy now. So, the majority of men and women report engaging in fantasy from time to time. So, we learned that the brain is the primary erogenous zone for all of us, and that to sexually arouse someone, you actually stimulate their brain. That is the most important part. And it's such a strong part, is like being really into the sexual experience and trying to meet each other's needs. So sexual daydreaming is associated with a higher sex drive. So those of you that spend a lot of time daydreaming about sex, you probably have a higher sex drive. Those of you that think about it less, probably a lower sex drive. That just kind of makes common sense. The most common fantasy is having sex with a loved one. So when they looked at, so I think that the study that they did this with was like a timer. And so the timer would go off like every 2 minutes or so, and they would ask, were you having a sexual fantasy? If so, what was it about? And that's how they're coming up with the statistic that most sexual fantasies come with a loved one. And when you think about it, I know that probably a lot of you are thinking like something like, maybe group sex fantasy or a BDSM fantasy like bondage dominance, or menage a trois, three-person fantasy, or with a certain person. But when you think about actually all of your sexual thoughts, not the kind of rare outsider ones, you're usually thinking about someone that you've had sex with or someone that you're in a relationship with. Okay, so fantasies are just that, fantasies. Many do not really want to make them a reality. So we're going to see on the next slide that the rape fantasy is common among women, being overpowered, being ravished by another man. But that's very different from an actual rape. An actual rape is usually very painful, and you're not attracted to the stranger at all, and it's not the same. And also we're going to talk about homosexual and heterosexual fantasies. And many heterosexual people fantasize about being in homosexual encounters, and homosexuals actually fantasize about being in heterosexual encounters. It's very common. We're going to find out that sexual orientation is a continuum. It's not a this or that. It's not black or white. It's just a big continuum. So if you're fantasizing about being with the same sex or the opposite sex, and how do you tell like if it's real or not, is I think if the only way that you can get aroused is by being with the opposite sex or same sex, if that's the predominant way and that's where you routinely go to, then maybe you would want to consider trying something different. Maybe your brain kind of craves that. But if you do it every now and then it's probably just your brain's need for a little bit of variety. So here's some fantasies of married women. Thoughts of an imaginary romantic lover enter my mind. As you can see, that's the dominant one. I relive a previous sexual experience. Very common to do that when it's really good. I'm pretending doing something forbidden. If you guys remember, doing something forbidden releases dopamine. I imagine that I'm being overpowered or forced to surrender. So you can see that that's a common. And if you look at these themes here, you will see that that's a common theme. And I'm going to have like a little video about real sex versus porn sex, and you're going to see that actually being tied up and things like that is, I think on the video they say about 40%, so it's pretty common. We talked about how the orgasm in the brain is actually activating kind of the pain area, so they're intertwined. I imagine myself delighting many men. I pretend that I struggle and resist before being aroused to surrender, as you can see, similar to overpowered. I pretend that I'm an irresistibly sexy female. I daydream that I'm being made love to by more than one man at a time. My thoughts center around feelings of weakness or helpless. I see myself as a striptease dancer. I pretend that I'm a horror prostitute. I imagine I'm being forced, again, there we go, forced to expose my body to a seducer. My thoughts center around urination or defecation, so that's pretty rare. Okay, so how do males and females' sexual fantasies differ? This is what I can tell you. Is the research shows that men's fantasies are more like quicker, just similar to the sexual response cycle. So here's like a typical male fantasy. Someone's walking down the road, hitchhiking, they need help, they're young and attractive, and they give them a ride, and then they say, hey, I'm going to take care of you. They give them a blowjob while they're driving, fellatio while they're driving, and then she says, thank you very much, and goes. Another common fantasy that I remember reading about, I read a book of male sexual fantasies, and I'm trying to summarize it, but here's like another example. The man and the secretary are working, and she happens to be young and beautiful, and they're working late one night. She has a boyfriend, he has a girlfriend, and she just says, oh, I just feel so stressed out. I just need a release. And they go in the closet. She lifts up her skirt. She bends over. He takes care of her. And she's very excited about the way he takes care of her. And then they go back to work and never talk about it again. So I would say that the theme that I saw with male sexual fantasies was more, it's just more of a fast, intense encounter. Domination is a common desire for men too. Homosexual, heterosexual, definitely running in there, but women's tends to be a little bit longer and a little bit more involved, whereas the men's is more just quick, we do it and everybody's happy very fast. I liken it to kind of the differences between male porn and female porn, because they are playing to the fantasies. The male porn is the guy kind of walks in, the girls are very eager, he pumps, he gets off, the girls are so excited that he gets off, and then he goes away. Whereas female porn is more, like caressing, a little bit more dialogue, holding afterwards, very similar. Okay, here, sharing sexual fantasies. Okay, so in this course, this is a tough course to teach. I do my best on it, but, it's controversial. It touches a nerve in a lot of people. Maybe a lot of people don't agree with what I say. Hopefully you guys know that I have the best intentions, and I do urge you to give me feedback when you don't like some things that I say, but I am going to caution you against sharing sexual fantasies. Not always, but I just want you to use, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for. Use caution. There's no other word I can think of. So look, we've talked about again and again that the area that sexual arousal is all in the brain, and our sexuality has been conditioned from early on. And I am not even going to try to slightly believe that I can change your mind about what you feel about sexuality. Some of you are much more open about sexuality, some of you are more closed about sexuality. And that's pretty strongly ingrained in you. All I can do in this class is I can try to show you historical differences. I can present you with knowledge, scientific knowledge. I can show you kind of what other people are feeling, and maybe it can budge you a little bit to think about your own. And so that's what I'm telling you with sexual fantasies, is if you try to share your sexual fantasy with someone that can't handle your sexual fantasy, I think it could cause major problems. And I'm going to give you a couple stories to illustrate this, just to reinforce that be careful with the sexual fantasies, because sexuality is so ingrained deeply with us that people sometimes just can't handle it, and this thought that they get in their head could ruin the relationship. But then I guess we have to come back to, do you want to be with somebody who can't handle your sexuality? And that's a big question. That's such a big question. If you have a great relationship, but your sexuality is not quite aligned with one another, is it worth it to you to stay with somebody? Or is it more worth it for you to be sexually aligned with someone? And is it possible to be completely sexually aligned? Because I find over and over again that we all have different sexual drives, we have different sexual fantasies. Okay, but here's some stories. Let me go on. I feel like I'm rambling. Okay, so this was actually an acquaintance of mine that this happened to, and sharing the sexual fantasy ruined their relationship. It's sad. So what happened was they were talking to one another, and she asked him, "What is your sexual fantasy?" And he said, "I would like to be with you and your sister." Now, to some of you, you're like, "Oh, okay, wow, why not? Why wouldn't you tell her that?" But she could not handle that. Like, thinking that her husband wanted to be with her sister was just, it hit on a wound too deep. She couldn't handle it. And so from that day forward, it started the breakdown of their relationship. And she believes that ultimately what ruined their relationship was his statement of that. And we talked about that with Gottman, as he found that if you look really deeply at what broke up your relationship, it was words that were said. Sometimes we say words that we literally cannot get past. There was some verbal communication that you just cannot get past. So there's one. Here's another one. This guy told this girl that he wanted her to put her fingers up his anus because he liked anal stimulation during sex play. She couldn't handle that. She thought that he was gay, and she just couldn't get past it, and she broke up with him for that. So anal stimulation for both males and females is very pleasurable for a lot of people, and it doesn't mean that you're gay. It's just you're probably in tune with what turns you on. Okay, so also that's such a misnomer. I feel embarrassed that I even said that. Like, thinking that all homosexual gay male sex is anal is ridiculous. Okay, we'll learn about that later. All right, here's another story. I remember it. It was this girl and this guy were going out, and he asked her what her sexual fantasy was, and she said she wanted to be gangbanged. And she said she just imagines herself in a gangbang, and he couldn't handle it. He broke up with her and just couldn't handle it. I've heard of other cases where the guy tells the girl, "I would like to have a threesome," and she just is like, "No. Never. That you even want that turns me off." So when you have a turn off from fantasies, sometimes the thoughts can roll around in your head and could cause some problems. So I wish that I could tell you that it's safe to tell everyone your sexual fantasies, but I'm going to tell you that sexuality is an issue where a lot of people can't get past it. So all I'm asking you is I'm not telling you to hide who you are, is I just want you to be aware that not all people can handle, like, maybe the diversity of your sexual complexity.